Alright, hi everyone. Welcome to the first Unity project. Hi everybody, welcome to the first project for the lab online. My name's Lucas. Today we're going to be making a game based on Flappy Bird, but we're going to be calling this one Flappy Fish, just so we don't step on anyone's toes. The first thing that we'll need to do to get started is make sure that you've downloaded the Flappy Fish resource pack. This is just in case you don't want to make your own graphics and you want to just get straight into the programming of the game. But if you wanted to, you could draw your own graphics for this game as well. But just in case, I've got these ready to go, just so we can get straight into it. So once that you've gotten that, a link to that resource pack will be available on this page. We'll make sure that you can download that. Once we're ready to go, we'll open up Unity and we'll click the new project button up here. We can type in a name for our project, so I'm going to call this Flappy Fish. I'm going to put this also in my documents folder, which we can just click this button here to pick a folder for ourselves. Documents, right click, new folder, Flappy Fish. Then we go enter, open it up, and then just select that empty folder. Click 2D so that Unity knows we're making a 2D game, and go create project. Awesome. Unity starts up a new fresh project for us to work in. So if you haven't seen the introduction to Unity videos, I highly recommend checking those out first, because I'm just going to get straight into making this game. That said, I will be explaining everything that I do in hopefully enough detail, so we can just get straight into it. Down here we have the assets folder, which there's nothing in it because we haven't made anything yet, but if we were to put some resources into this folder, so those pictures that we have in the resource folder here, if we can open that up, or open up wherever it is on your computer, we can just drag over all of those resources and click and drag them into the assets folder. Unity is smart enough to know what to do with that. It'll do the rest of the work for you basically, which is very, very helpful. And that should bring everything that we need into the game, into Unity, so we can build a game. The first thing we need to do is we'll make our fish. The first thing we need to do is have a fish, or a bird, whatever you want to draw. But I'm doing a fish who just appears right in the middle of the screen. This is what our game is going to look like. He's a bit big at the moment, so I might want to make him a bit smaller. So if we go and click on that sprite, which is just another word for a picture, we go pixels per unit. If I make that 200, that should make him a bit smaller. There's other ways to do this in Unity with this variable here, scale, but I want to be using the pixels per unit just so that we can keep everything at one normal size, because it can get a bit confusing if you start making things too big, and Unity can freak out a bit. The other important thing that we really need to know before we move on is that obviously these are the things in our level so far. We have a main camera, which we can move around by clicking this movement button and then dragging the arrows around, which you probably have covered in the introduction to Unity videos. But when we click on one of these objects, obviously the inspector here will show up everything that's on that object. So for the camera, you've got size, so you can shrink how big or small the camera is. A few other variables we don't really need at the moment. So when we click on our fish, the only thing he has is a position, transform. Everything has a transform, but all that really means is sort of where that object is. That's all it means. Position is just where it is, up, down, left, right. Z it doesn't get used in a 2D game, that's only for 3D. Rotation is how it's rotated, but we don't really need that for a 2D game. I guess we might use that. Actually, we will use Z later on. And scale is just how big it is. And every object has that, so you can always mess with those. Besides that, he just has the sprite, which means he's a picture. But we want to add a few more things to him, because when we run our game, he just sits there. Nothing actually happens. So if you've played Flappy Bird before, you'll know the first thing that happens when you press start the bird falls to the ground because of gravity. So we need to add a bit of gravity. And to make our game object do any more than it already does, we just need to add some components. Or we could write a script. A script will also help us move this object around. But to add gravity, that's already built into Unity. We just click on the Add Component button, go to Physics 2D, and click on Rigid Body 2D. Now, without doing anything else, if we play the game, he falls. Slowly, but he does actually fall. I might make that 2. This is how you change how fast he falls, how much gravity is being applied to him. So if we set that to 2, he'll fall a bit quicker. And 4 would be even quicker again. But 2 is fine for now. So that's good, that's a start. But the other main thing that is in a Flappy Bird style game is making him jump. So in order to do that, we'll need to make a script. And a script is just basically Unity's way of figuring out, it lets you do a lot of things. You can give control to pretty much any aspect of the engine in the game. So in this one, we want to know if the player presses the spacebar, what does the fish do? He jumps up a bit. That's our first goal. So that shouldn't be too hard to accomplish. To make a new script, we just right-click in our Assets folder, go up to the Create tab, and click C# script. And then it'll create that, and we give it a name. I'm going to call this Fish Control. And then press Enter to open that. And that'll get open in a new project called MonoDevelop. That's just Unity's program for building and making and editing codes, or scripts, sorry. So this might look, I don't know if you've ever programmed before, this might look kind of intimidating. We're going to do something very simple so that it doesn't need to, and you can just follow along. You can just type what I type, just to keep things very simple for now. So what we need to do is make some variables. If you're not familiar with what a variable is, the short explanation is that it's basically a number or a kind of, it's like a container for information, and you can edit or change that information as the game is being played. So if you had lives and you picked up an extra life item, you would gain, that number would go from whatever it was to +1. If you had 3 lives, you got a new one, it would go up to 4. So those numbers change over time. So we need to make a few of those. And the first one we're going to make is a number that determines how high our fish jumps when we press the spacebar. So that will be make it public, first of all. But that kind of variable we can call an int. An int is basically any whole number, like first we'll call this jump. We'll say it's equal to 5. And then we put a semicolon at the end just to designate that we're done with that instruction. So this could be 5, could be 10, could be 0, could be -20. But the point is, it doesn't have any extra parts at the end of it. It's just a whole number. There's another one that does the whole number thing, and we'll worry about that in a moment. So we've got our public int called jump. We also need to talk. If you remember back in Unity, we added a component called the rigid body, and that had a part called gravity scale. The rigid body will control anything to do with something being moved physically. So because we want to move our fish physically, basically, which means we need to talk to the rigid body with this script. In the script, we're going to be talking with that rigid body component. So to do that, we need to add in here rigid body 2D. And I'm going to call this just RB, so it's nice and easy. Now there's these parts here, which are a little bit different. That's all we need for now. These parts here are a little bit different. They're called functions, and they happen at various, you can trigger, it's basically an event. You can trigger it whenever you need it inside the game. Start is a default function. It happens when whenever this script appears in the game, this will happen once. Update is a pretty interesting function. It happens 60 times every second. That's very fast, and that happens a lot. So if you're not careful with update, you can accidentally crash your game, and you don't really want that. So on start, which only happens once, we'll say RB, which is a rigid body 2D, equals get component. And then you want to use these little triangle brackets, which you get by holding shift and comma period. Then next to the question mark key in case you can't find it. We want to go get component rigid body 2D. Then we want to hold shift and then press 9 and 0 to get the normal brackets. And then a semicolon, which is next to the enter key near a few keys over. And that's that. Then we move down to update, and now what happens is we can talk to rigid body, the RB we just made, which it's kind of like a shortcut so that we can just quickly say to the game, we're gonna move something's rigid body, we're gonna move it physically. So now what we say is if, we open our brackets again, input dot get key down. And what this does is it checks if a button gets pressed on the keyboard. So 60 times a second, this script is going to ask, is a key being pressed? And that key, which we put into these brackets here, is going to be keycode dot space. So that's the space bar. 60 times a second, if the space bar gets pressed, do whatever is inside these brackets here. These brackets are they're just curly brackets. You get those by holding shift and pressing the two brackets next to the P key on your keyboard. Basically, when this happens, when space gets pressed, whatever is inside those brackets is going to happen next, which what we want is RB dot add force. And what that'll do is add motion to our character. Now we open the 9 0 brackets again, and we say vector 2 dot up times jump, and then at the end of that bracket you can just put a semicolon. Now the really important part is you've got to go up to File and press the Save, click the Save option. Now when we go back into Unity, now that our script does something, we can drag it over to the fish object. If Unity doesn't let you drag this up and put it on the fish object, it might be because you have an error. The way to know if you have an error is this little grey bar down here will have some red writing on it. You might need a little bit of help figuring out what the error is. Maybe in the future I can go over some of those basic errors. But a really quick way of finding out is to just jump on Google and type in what's happened. We can cover those errors in another video, but there's a few common ones that come up quite frequently. If your code looks exactly like this, if your script looks like this, it should run pretty well. It shouldn't have any errors. But you can always ask for help. Feel free to send someone an email if you're having a bit of trouble getting your game running. Once we've put that script onto our game object, you'll see that the word jump has come up here, and that's the variable that we made in this script, which is just it's a number, basically a whole number. But because we called it public by using the word public here, that means that Unity will show it up in the inspector, so we can edit this while the game's running. If you click on it and drag, you can move it up and down. I think we want to make this about 500, just for now, because it takes a lot of force to move an object in Unity. Now let's run the game and see if it works. Yeah, it looks to be working. When you press the spacebar, a little bit of force gets added. So that's the start. It's the very, very basic beginnings of Flappy Bird. Awesome. Alright, so our game works. That should be it for, I mean, it's a start, it's a very small start, but we'll make this game a bit more fleshed out in the next video. Now that we've got a script running, we can get to So there you go. Now our game is it's got a bit of functionality. You can see how we can write a script, then add it to a game object to change what happens. In the next video we'll do a bit more stuff and make our fish work a bit better, and we'll add some obstacles for him to jump over. Alright, we'll see you then.